I never knew that the coldest thing on a freezing mountain was a best friend's heart. My name is Ethan. For 10 years, Marcus and I climbed the world's most dangerous peaks together. We shared food, tents, and secrets. I trusted him completely. But today, that deep trust became my death sentence. We were climbing the deadly North Peak. The sky was clear blue when we started. We wanted to break the world record for the fastest climb. Marcus was climbing ahead of me. He looked strong and determined. But suddenly, the sky turned completely black. A terrible storm was coming fast. The wind screamed like a wild animal. Heavy snow blinded my eyes. I yelled to Marcus to turn back. "We must go down to the base camp," I shouted over the loud wind. But Marcus ignored me. He kept climbing higher into the dark, freezing clouds. I had to follow him. We reached a narrow ice path. We rested behind a large rock. I was freezing and tired. I looked at Marcus's heavy backpack. I saw the green light of his emergency weather radio. It was flashing wildly, but the sound was completely turned off. I stared at it in pure shock. "Marcus, your radio is flashing," I yelled. I reached out and turned the volume button up. A loud, panicked voice immediately came from the speaker. "Warning! Massive blizzard approaching North Peak. All climbers return immediately." The warning had been playing for hours. Marcus had secretly muted the sound to ignore it. "Why did you turn it off?" I asked, feeling a cold fear in my stomach. "We would lose the world record," Marcus yelled back angrily. His eyes were wide and crazy. He cared more about fame than our own lives. He had intentionally led us straight into a deadly trap. Before I could argue, the mountain began to shake violently. A loud roar echoed from above. It sounded like an exploding bomb. I looked up and saw a massive wall of white snow rushing down toward us. It was a terrifying avalanche. There was nowhere to run. We were doomed. The heavy snow hit us with the force of a speeding truck. I was thrown off my feet instantly. I spun helplessly in the freezing white darkness. I could not breathe. I could not see. I thought I was dead. Then, the rope around my waist suddenly stopped me with a violent jerk. The avalanche passed. The air cleared slowly. I opened my eyes and looked around. My heart stopped. The snow had pushed us off the path. We were both hanging by a single, thin rope over a terrifying cliff. Below my feet was a bottomless, dark valley. We were hanging by a thread. We hung in the freezing air for 12 agonizing hours. The brutal wind cut through my thick clothes like tiny, sharp knives. I looked up at the rope. Marcus was hanging a few meters above me. His heavy ice axes were stuck deeply into the frozen wall. He was stable. I was not so lucky. My right arm had hit a hard rock during the violent avalanche. It was broken. I could not move my fingers. I could not pull myself up the rope. I was completely helpless, swinging gently over the dark, empty valley. I depended entirely on Marcus. "Marcus," I shouted weakly. "My arm is broken. I cannot climb. You have to pull me up." Marcus did not answer immediately. He looked down at me. His face was hidden behind his dark snow goggles. "I am trying, Ethan," he finally replied. But his voice sounded strange and distant. The cold was slowly killing us. My stomach hurt with terrible hunger. We had lost our main supply bags in the avalanche. "Do you have any food left?" I begged him. "I need some energy." Marcus shook his head sadly. No, Ethan. Everything is gone. We have absolutely nothing left. I closed my eyes, accepting the painful truth. But then a sudden gust of wind blew downward. It carried a very distinct, sweet smell. It was the rich scent of dark chocolate. I opened my eyes in shock. I looked closely at Marcus's thick winter jacket. His hands were slightly covering his mouth. He was chewing slowly. I saw the shiny edge of a silver chocolate wrapper sticking out of his chest pocket. The life-saving food was right there. He was secretly eating the last piece of chocolate while I was freezing and starving below him. You have chocolate, I whispered, my heart breaking. Marcus stopped chewing. He looked down at me, and this time, he did not look sorry. He looked annoyed. My best friend was quietly choosing to survive alone. The bond of brotherhood between us was already dead. Suddenly, a sharp snapping sound echoed above us. Crack. We both looked up. The single rope holding us was rubbing tightly against a sharp, jagged piece of rock. The heavy weight of our two bodies was pulling it down. The protective outer layer of the rope was tearing apart. The rope could not hold two grown men for much longer. We were both going to fall and die. Marcus looked at the fraying rope. Then, he looked down at me. His eyes changed completely. The fear was gone. A cold, dark, and terrifying calculation appeared in his eyes. He looked at my broken arm, and then he looked at the deep, dark valley below my boots. I suddenly understood the dark thoughts in his head. If he wanted to live, he needed to lose some weight. He needed to drop his heavy, useless burden. He needed to drop me. Marcus, please don't do this, I begged. My voice shook with pure terror. I knew exactly what he was thinking. We can climb together. Just pull me up a little bit. We are brothers, Marcus. I looked deeply into his eyes, searching for the good man I once knew. Marcus did not pull the rope. Instead, he slowly reached down to his thick leather belt. His hand touched the black handle of his climbing knife. He pulled the sharp, silver blade out of its cover. The cold metal shined brightly in the freezing, gray mountain light. My heart stopped. I am so sorry, Ethan, Marcus cried. Tears fell from his eyes, but they felt completely fake. The rope is breaking. It cannot hold us both. If I do not cut it, we will both die here. I have to make the hard choice for us. No, you can hold me. I screamed wildly. But Marcus shook his head. I have a family, Ethan, he sobbed loudly. My wife is pregnant. She is waiting for me at home. My unborn baby needs a father. I have to live for them. Please forgive me, my friend. I stared at him in complete, frozen shock. I knew every detail of his life. Marcus was single. He did not have a wife. He did not have a pregnant girlfriend. He was inventing a pathetic, disgusting lie to make himself feel like a noble hero. He was a monster. You are lying, I shouted angrily. But Marcus ignored my words. He began to lower himself slightly down the rope. He came closer to me. I thought he changed his mind to help me, but his hands reached past my shoulders. He grabbed the straps of my small backpack. What are you doing? I cried. My small backpack contained the last remaining emergency oxygen tank. Marcus unclipped the straps quickly. He pulled my backpack off my shoulders and attached it to his own harness. He was stealing my final breath of air before killing me. I will need this for the climb down, Marcus said coldly. The fake tears were completely gone from his face. He looked at me like I was already a dead body. He raised the sharp knife and placed the silver blade firmly against the tight, stretched rope above my head. "Goodbye, Ethan," he whispered softly. Then he moved the knife backward and forward with a swift, violent motion. The thick nylon fibers ripped apart instantly with a loud crack. The connection between us was totally severed. The sudden release of weight threw Marcus upward towards safety. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. Gravity grabbed my heavy body like a giant, invisible hand. I fell backward into the dark, empty air. The freezing wind roared in my ears as I plunged straight down into the terrifying, bottomless white abyss below. Falling is a strange experience. Time seems to slow down completely. As I dropped through the freezing white fog, I saw the faces of my parents. I thought about the warm sun. I waited for the final, deadly crash that would end my life. I closed my eyes tightly. The impact was sudden and violently painful. I did not hit hard rock. I crashed into a deep, soft bank of fresh snow. It was a hidden ledge deep inside a narrow ice cliff. The deep snow saved my life, but the terrible landing shattered my left leg instantly. I screamed in pure agony. The pain shot through my body like hot lightning. I rolled over in the dark, cold snow, grabbing my broken leg. I was alive, but I was trapped in a deep, freezing hole. The sky above was just a tiny, dark gray line. I lay there for hours, shaking violently from the extreme cold. It was completely dark now. I could not see my own hands. I knew I was going to freeze to death by morning. I tried to move to stay warm. My hands searched the icy ground blindly. My freezing fingers touched something hard under the snow. It did not feel like a rock. It felt like stiff, smooth fabric. I dug through the snow wildly. I touched a cold, hard shape. It was a human face. A frozen, dead face. I jumped back in pure horror. I breathed heavily, my heart pounding in my chest. I had landed right next to a dead mountain climber. He must have fallen into this exact hole many years ago. His body was perfectly frozen in the ice. It was a terrifying, lonely grave in the dark mountain. But as the initial panic faded, a strong instinct to survive took over my mind. The dead climber had a large, heavy backpack covered in ice. I ignored my fear. I pulled my knife and carefully cut the frozen straps of the dead man's bag. I opened it slowly. My hands shook as I pulled items from the frozen bag. It was a miracle. Inside, wrapped in waterproof plastic, I found a thick roll of medical tape. I found a small, full mini gas stove. And finally, I found a bright orange emergency whistle. The dead man carried life. This stranger had died alone in the dark, but his tragic end was going to give me a second chance to live. He possessed the exact tools I needed to survive this freezing hell. I looked at the frozen face with deep, honest gratitude. I would not die here today. I had a broken leg, a broken arm, and a broken heart. My best friend had murdered me. But sitting next to the frozen body, a burning, fierce anger ignited in my soul. I was going to crawl out of this deep grave. I was going to find Marcus. The pain in my left leg was unbearable. The bone was broken completely. But I had to fix it if I wanted to live. I took my remaining heavy metal ice axe. I placed the cold metal handle against the side of my broken, swollen leg to keep it straight. I took the medical tape from the dead climber's bag. I wrapped the thick, sticky tape tightly around my leg and the axe. I screamed as the broken bones moved, biting my lip until it bled. Finally, my leg was secure. It was a crude, painful splint, but it worked. I started my terrible journey upward. I could not walk. I could only use my one good arm and my right knee to pull my heavy body up the steep, snowy slope. It was absolute torture. Every single inch of movement brought a new wave of hot, blinding pain. I dragged myself through the freezing snow for a whole day. My clothes were torn, and my hands were bleeding badly. Suddenly, my fingers brushed against a hard, black plastic object buried in the white snow. I dug it out. It was a small, heavy mountain radio. I recognized it instantly. It was Marcus's backup radio. It must have fallen from his pocket when the avalanche hit us. I wiped the snow off the speaker and pressed the power button. A green light flashed. It still had battery power. I brought it close to my cold ear. I pressed the button to call for help, but it was broken. The microphone was smashed by the rocks. I could listen, but I could not speak. I turned the dial slowly, searching for the rescue channel. Suddenly, I heard a voice cutting through the radio static. It was Marcus. He was speaking directly to the mountain rescue team at the base camp. His voice was shaking with loud, dramatic tears. "He is gone," Marcus cried through the radio. "Ethan is gone. We were hanging by one rope. It was breaking under our weight." I stopped breathing. I listened to his disgusting words in the cold snow. "Ethan looked at me," Marcus continued, sobbing loudly. "He smiled and told me to take care of my pregnant wife. Then he took his knife. He cut his own rope to save my life. He sacrificed himself." A wave of pure, intense disgust washed over me. Marcus was not just a murderer. He was a brilliant, evil liar. He was turning his cowardly crime into a beautiful story of sacrifice. He was stealing my honor and claiming the title of a tragic, surviving hero. "We will organize a memorial for his brave sacrifice," the rescue leader replied gently over the radio. I gripped the plastic radio tightly until my knuckles turned white. Marcus thought I was dead. He thought his dark secret was safe. But he was completely wrong. The ghost was coming home. I listened to Marcus on the radio for hours. My body was freezing, but my mind was burning with a wildfire. He was telling the whole world his beautiful lie. I knew I had to move faster. I had to reach the low valley before the mountain rescue team left. My leg felt like it was on fire. I pushed my body forward, pulling my broken weight through the deep, heavy snow. Every movement was a brutal fight against death. I was starving, but my hunger was gone. Revenge was the only food I needed now. I had to expose Marcus. The wind suddenly stopped. I looked up and saw a distant, flickering light in the valley below. It was a small mountain cabin. My heart beat fast. I reached into my coat and pulled out the emergency whistle I took from the dead climber. I blew it with all my lungs. The sound was sharp and loud. I blew it again and again. A few minutes later, I saw a figure running toward me with a bright flashlight. It was a local hunter. He saw my broken body in the snow. He did not ask questions. He just picked me up. I woke up in a small, warm cabin. My leg was heavily bandaged, but the pain was better. The hunter gave me hot water and soup. I grabbed his arm tightly. "I need to go to the city," I said firmly. "I have to stop a man who is a killer." The hunter looked at my broken body with pity. "You cannot walk, my friend," he said quietly. I pointed to the mountain radio on the table. "I have everything I need to prove the truth," I whispered. I realized that my survival was not just luck, it was a deadly, cold trap. I took the GPS tracker I found in Marcus's dropped belongings. It had his exact path on the mountain. He had lied about our location to the rescuers to ensure they would never find my body. This small, black device was the smoking gun. It showed exactly where he had cut the rope. Marcus thought he was the hero of the story. He believed his own lies. He was currently preparing for his national memorial ceremony at the city hall. He was planning to receive millions of dollars in donations. He had no idea that the ghost he created was coming back to life. I told the hunter my story. He was a man of honor. He helped me get to the city hall just as the ceremony was beginning. I was weak, broken, and looked like a wild man from the ice. But I was ready. I was the living truth coming to kill his lie. The city hall was crowded with cameras and famous reporters. The room was decorated with large, sad photos of my face. People were crying. The mayor stood on the stage, speaking about my brave sacrifice. Marcus stood beside him, bowing his head to look appropriately sad and humble. I pushed open the heavy wooden doors of the city hall. The loud sound made everyone jump. Hundreds of people turned to look at the entrance. I was limping on my makeshift crutches, my face covered in dry blood and white snow. The room fell into a total, heavy silence. Marcus looked at the door. His face changed instantly. He looked like he had seen a ghost. His eyes opened wide, and he dropped his glass of water on the floor. The sound echoed in the quiet hall. He stood frozen, unable to speak or move a single muscle. The mayor walked down from the stage. "Who are you?" he asked. I looked directly at Marcus. I could see the sweat dripping down his pale forehead. He was staring at me with pure terror. He knew his life as a hero was over. He was a trapped rat. "My name is Ethan," I said loudly. My voice sounded rough and deep, like ice grinding against stone. "I am the man who sacrificed himself for a hero." The reporters began to whisper. They started taking photos of my broken body. Marcus's legs began to shake uncontrollably under his suit. I walked toward the stage. Each step was a painful test of my willpower. Marcus tried to run, but the police officers were standing near the doors. He looked at me, hoping I would keep his secret. I felt a cold joy. His nightmare had only just begun today. "Marcus," I said, my voice shaking the entire room. "Tell the mayor how you cut the rope." The crowd started to yell. People were confused and shocked. Marcus started to cry fake, pathetic tears again. "It is a lie. He is crazy. The mountain made him sick," he screamed desperately. I pulled the black GPS device from my pocket and held it high for everyone to see. "This device records every step you took on the mountain, Marcus," I said clearly. "It shows exactly where we were when you cut my rope. It shows you never went to the rescue zone." The detectives stepped forward. They had been listening to my radio reports from the hunter's cabin. They reached for Marcus's arms. He fought them for a moment, but he was weak and terrified. He was not a hero. He was just a small, greedy man caught in his own web. He was dragged out of the hall in handcuffs. The cameras flashed like lightning. I watched my best friend go to prison. I was broken and I would never climb again, but I was free. I turned around and walked out of the hall into the warm, bright morning sun. The trial lasted for many weeks. The judge and the jury saw the GPS evidence. They heard the recordings from the mountain rescue radio. Marcus tried to explain himself many times. He said he was scared and confused on the mountain. He said cutting the rope was a terrible, tragic mistake. But the evidence was too strong. The prosecution showed the knife he used. They showed the records of his fake marriage. They proved he killed his previous partner, David, years ago to win a different prize. He was a serial killer who used mountains to hide his bloody, cruel crimes. The jury found Marcus guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to life in prison. I watched him being taken away in chains. He looked small, old, and very weak. All his fame and golden records were gone. He had lost everything he had ever fought for so selfishly. I spent many months in the hospital after the trial. The doctors worked hard to fix my leg and arm. I could not climb anymore, but I could walk slowly with a cane. My body was healing, but my heart was still very cold. I felt very empty and alone now. One afternoon, I received a small letter in the mail. It was a handwritten note from the hospital prison ward. It was from Marcus. I opened it with shaking hands, wondering why he would write to me after everything. I expected more lies or maybe a request for forgiveness. The letter was short. It did not ask for my love or forgiveness. It only had 3 sentences. You win, Ethan. The mountain was always yours. I hope you find peace. It was his final, honest admission of his defeat. He finally realized that his greed had destroyed his life. I sat in my room, looking out at the distant mountain peak. It looked so beautiful and quiet in the sunlight. I realized then that I did not need to climb to be happy. I needed to live honestly. I burned the letter in my fireplace and let it go. A few days later, I decided to do something I had been avoiding for a long time. I visited the grave of the man who died on the mountain years before me. I brought flowers for David, the man Marcus had killed. I sat there in silence for a long time. He was a stranger, but he was also my savior. Without his gear and his frozen grave, I would have died alone in the dark. I whispered a small prayer for him. I promised to tell his story so he would never be forgotten. I was finally starting to heal. I left the graveyard and walked toward the small mountain town. I saw a young man standing near the edge of the woods. He looked lost and sad. He was looking at the peak of the mountain with longing eyes. I walked up to him slowly and offered a kind smile. I stopped next to the young man. He was young, maybe 20 years old. He carried a heavy backpack that looked very professional. The North Peak is very beautiful today, I said to him gently. He turned to me and nodded with excitement. I hope to climb it soon, he said. I looked at his gear. He was young and full of dreams, just like Marcus and I used to be. But he did not have the cold, dark greed that destroyed my best friend. Be careful, I warned him. The mountain is not a trophy. It is a home for the brave. He looked at me with curiosity. You know a lot about mountains, he remarked. I leaned on my cane and laughed softly. I know too much, I replied. I told him about the beauty of the ice, but I also told him about the cost of pride and human greed. He listened to every word. I saw a new kind of respect in his eyes. He thanked me for the advice and walked away. I watched him go, feeling a strange sense of peace. I had become a teacher instead of a climber. My scars were now my greatest lessons. Months went by and my life changed completely. I started working as a mountain guide for beginners. I did not take them to dangerous peaks. I took them to low hills where they could see the sunrise. I taught them how to respect the ice and how to care for their teammates. I found joy in the small things. I liked the smell of coffee in the morning and the sound of birds in the woods. I did not care about breaking records anymore. Life was not a race to the top. It was a slow walk through the valleys with people you really trust. One afternoon, a journalist came to my small house. She was writing a book about the mountain and the tragic crimes that happened there. She wanted to hear my story again. I told her everything about David, Marcus, and my own painful survival. She listened to me with total respect. When she left, she told me that my story would help many people understand the dangers of greed. I realized my story was not just mine anymore. It belonged to David and to everyone who climbed for the wrong reasons. My survival was a warning, but also a call for true humanity. I was finally able to sleep through the night without dreaming of falling. The fear that Marcus had planted in my mind was gone. I owned my own life again. I walked into my garden and looked at the mountain one last time. It no longer looked like a monster. It was just a mountain. It had no judgment. It did not care about greed or records. It was simply there, ancient and wild. I turned away from it and went inside to make myself dinner. I was alive, I was safe, and for the first time in a long time, I was truly happy. I still walk with a cane, but my stride is confident. The mountains are still there, standing tall and proud against the sky. Sometimes, people ask me if I hate them for what happened. I always tell them the same thing. I do not hate the mountains. I hate the greed. I created a small memorial for David near the base camp. It is a simple stone with his name carved on it. Every year, I go there to light a candle. It is a reminder that even in the darkest ice, there can be a small light of remembrance and human kindness. My parents visit me often now. We sit in my kitchen and talk about the simple things. They are happy that I am alive and healthy. They never ask me to climb again. They know that the man who returned from the mountain is someone they love even more than before. I started a small group for young climbers in the valley. We meet every Friday to talk about mountain safety. We share stories and laughter. It is a place of trust. We are a family of people who understand that the greatest peak is not made of rock, but of true friendship. Marcus is still in prison, serving his sentence. I never visited him, and I never will. I do not have anger left, but I have a boundary. Some betrayals are too deep for words. I have let go of the pain, but I have not forgotten the lesson he taught me. Life is fragile, like a thin, fraying rope in a storm. We never know when it might snap. That is why it is so important to hold on to the people who would never cut our ropes. It is about who we choose to climb with during the darkest nights of our lives. The sun sets behind the mountains, painting the sky in colors of orange and gold. I sit on my porch, enjoying the quiet evening air. I am not a record breaker, and I am not a victim. I am just a man who survived the ice and found his own way home. My story is finished, but my life continues. I walk in the valley where the air is sweet and the path is level. I do not need the top of the world to see the stars. I have everything I need right here in this quiet, peaceful moment of simple, honest gratitude. I hope you who read this story find your own way through your storms. We all have mountains to climb, and we all have ropes that we hold. Be careful who you tie your life to. And always remember, the most important climb is the one that brings you back home safely to yourself. The mountains remain, but I have changed. I am Ethan, a man who knows the truth of the ice. I survived the fall, and I survived the lie. Now I simply live. And in that living, I have finally found the peak I was always searching for all along.